A couple of months ago, I published an expose about this guy named Elliot Temple. He runs a group and a forum online. It used to be called Fallible Ideas. Now it's called the Critical Fallibilism Discussion Forum. And he is an extremely toxic person. Many people have had very bad, terrible experiences with him. And since I published my expose of him, there has actually been a lot of support from people that he has hurt. And I'm very thankful for that. I want to acknowledge that. And I've been and I've been having continued dialogues with these people about their experiences, and I think it's helpful to understand just the kind of person Temple is and the effect that he's had on people to review some of the stuff they've told me about him and their experiences, because it can be difficult for people who haven't interacted with him to understand what former members of his forum are going through. And it's a little bit like if you've been in a car accident and you explain it to someone how horrible it was and how you're still suffering from it. To someone who's never been in a car accident, it's just going to be extremely difficult to understand. But what you can try is get more people to relay their experience and explain it to that person, and then maybe they get a better sense of it, you know. And also this helps solidify my claims, because I can write about Temple all day long if I'm the only person who says these things. That's one thing, but if other people come forward and explain what Temple has done from from their side, from their point of view, then that just gives you more of an objective kind of account of what's really going on. As I explained here, like I want to protect these people from retaliation, so I'm leaving out names and details. I've lightly edited the quotes that I'm about to show you because I don't want, like, I want to protect them as much as possible. Um, but I also want to point out, just so you know, that these are real quotes from real people. If one day I'm ordered to produce the original texts in court, then I could easily do that. And I'm also going to give some public quotes. Like, these are quotes that are already public, and these further solidify the anonymous quotes that I'm about to give. So Temple has bragged that he can break anyone. Here's the full quote. He said in 2017, "I can break anyone. I can ask questions, criticize errors, and advocate for more progress until they give up and refuse to speak. No one can handle that if I really try. I can bring up enough of people's flaws that it's overwhelming and unwanted." Okay, so let that sink in for a second. And he's done this with several people, and as a result, those people are traumatized and psychologically unable to deal with him effectively. And the quotes I'm about to give, they reflect that. And this has to stop. Like, Temple must be held accountable. This is not okay. So here's the first one. By the way, keep in mind these are 2 decades, so this is not some isolated incident. And these are, I'm not going to say the number of people, but these are several. Let's just say that. Various people spanning roughly 2 decades of experiences that they had with Temple since the early 2000s. Okay, so this is not some isolated incident. I think we can safely conclude that this is the kind of person that he is. All right, so one person says, "Elliot Temple is a truly damaging, vile person. The experience in Temple's group was harrowing." One person says, "Temple certainly tried to break me after smearing me, riddling me with one-sided questions, and simultaneously ignoring my questions. He gave up and used his powers as administrator to simply block me from the group." Okay. This reminded me of something that happened when I tried to extend an olive branch to Temple last year to see if we could reconcile. That was a big mistake. Should not have done that. Um, and just like in this case, Temple ignored several of my questions, but he still expected me to answer his. And then he just stopped talking when I didn't answer them to his satisfaction. One person says, "I may be interested in a support group for the abuse I received on Temple's forum Fallible Ideas, both as a proxy for the many bullies of the world as well as for their own bullying itself." Another person says, I can offer the testimony of the ill treatment I encountered. If you're kind of wondering what kind of ill treatment might we be talking about here, there's public shaming that I'm going to get into in a second. There's also verbal abuse. So Temple, this is the kind of tone Temple has in his forum. He says this to people. I hesitate to say it out loud because YouTube might demote my video. I'm not sure. He says this. He says it again. He does this repeatedly. He said to his former mentor, David Deutsch, "You suck." That's the kind of tone. DIF stands for this. It's just awful, awful things that you could say to somebody. How is this? He says that his group is about philosophy and learning and being rational and learning to make progress. What on earth could this have to do with being rational? Treating someone like this, verbally abusing them like this. It's just terrible. And then he does it again 2 years later in public. So that's the kind of tone that Temple can have in his form. Okay. So the public shaming that I mentioned, these next four quotes are about that. So Temple published in 2019 a nasty list of fallible ideas evaders. It had 33 people on it who, quote, had discussion contact with fallible ideas and then quit, evaded, lied, etc., end quote. Now Temple claimed that the purpose of the list was to figure out why people had left. So, if he's really interested, he can read these quotes. That should help him figure it out. But in reality, what really happened is, if you publish a list like that, I mean, first of all, list making is extremely toxic. Who on earth does that? Second of all, when you do that, you just alienate and other former members. And it also has the effect of pressuring current members who are still in the group to remain in his group because they don't want to be publicly shamed like that and incur even more emotional damage than they've already incurred, as I'm about to show. So here's one person. What did they experience in Temple's group? They say, I was name called, blocked from posting, and then had my email published in an attempt to damage my reputation. That's in reference to the fallible ideas, list of evaders. They continue, I don't understand why they acted with such meanness and vindication, but I suppose they could have done even worse. Okay, so this person is saying Temple and his associates were already being mean to him, but they wouldn't have put it past him if he had done worse. Another person says, had I told him my real name, only to later find it posted in Elliot Temple's publicly shaming list of liars, evaders, etc., the emotional damage to me would have been worse than it was. My involvement with fallible ideas was an unwanted detriment during major life challenges I had to navigate at the time. Okay, so this person is happy, looking back, that they never shared their real name with Temple. And my God, I'm jealous. I wish Temple didn't know that I even existed. Certainly wish that he didn't know my real name. Um, but anyway, this person is glad, looking back, that they never told Elliot Temple their real name. And they share my interpretation of what the list really did, which is publicly shame people for leaving his group. And they're saying that they had already incurred. Worse than it was means this person was actually not even, I don't even know their real name. So it could be a she, I don't know. This person had already incurred emotional damage in Temple's group and describes it as an unwanted detriment. Like these are strong words, but they're not unfounded. They're actually really well founded. Another person says, Elliot Temple is a fanatic moron who happens to think I'm an evader. Okay. Another person says, I can certainly commiserate with others over the discomfort of being on the list of evaders and offer a listening ear to those who have been hurt. All right. So there's more to commiserate, right? They share, let's see. Feel express sorrow and pity for, sympathize with, to feel or express, feel sorrow, pain, right? So they're being empathetic. That's what they're saying here. Commiserate. I'm not a native speaker, so I like to look stuff up. But all right, they express discomfort and they say that people have been hurt. Okay. And I'm glad to report that thanks to my efforts, Temple actually took down that list of invaders. So and that's a small win. He did kind of braid them, I guess. He does this thing where I'll explain more of that in another video maybe, but he does this thing where he makes himself look really reasonable in the public eye while being exceptionally difficult to deal with, actually. And what he kind of did is just he traded that list, which wasn't really important to him, for like a total of three more articles that he could then write about me. But he looks reasonable because he took that list down. Anyway, it's a small win. I'll take it. Came at a cost, but it's a good thing he took it down. It's a welcome development. Another person says their experience at Temple's group was certainly unpleasant. Okay, another person says Temple lacked a lot of social calibration and civility. He was pretty unpleasant a lot of the time. Okay, yeah, that's putting it mildly. Here, another person says over the years, Temple style became even more cold and vicious at times. And again, I'll remind you of the some of the quotes that he's thrown at people. You just don't do that. Presumably because there weren't other moderators involved and because many of the community members were Eliot's followers, disciples. So this choice of wording here is telling because that tells you that there's something creepy going on in Temple's group, right? This goes beyond just being a casual group online that discusses philosophy books or whatever. There's something more going on here. They continue, whatever you want to call them, they all tended to have a similar harsh and uncivil tone in arguments. Here's a particularly sad one. Elliot and others tried to convince me that I should break up with my partner because they said all forms of romantic/sexual relationships are irrational and bad. I'm glad I didn't listen to them, as that would have destroyed my life as I know it today. That's powerful. Destroyed their life. My God. Okay, somebody took a look at my expose and writes, Elliot has only gotten more toxic and cruel over time. He was always uncivil, but I don't remember him doing things like boasting about being able to break people in the time I spoke with him. Holy crap, I don't even know what to say. When I knew him, he always couched all of his hostile language in the guise of aloof rationality. Actively delighting in your ability to break someone is unhinged. And another person says, participating in Elliot's various lists and forums was not good for me. Okay. Now here's some more quotes. These are already public, so there's no point in making them anonymous. And I've also given them before, but they bear repeating. Brett Hall says, rightly, I think, any project that one does decide to undertake will be less likely derailed or poisoned were Temple not involved. Okay. Elliot Temple quoted that himself. And there's physicist Deutsch. Temple claims that Deutsch used to be Temple's mentor. Deutsch replied to an email of Temple's, which I've never seen. Temple quotes David's response, but not his own email that might have caused this response. So we're kind of supposed to take Temple's word for it, which I refuse to do. But here's Temple's quote of Deutsch. Deutsch wrote to Temple, allegedly, you're entirely mistaken. I'm terrified and will be unable to work for at least a day now, and who knows how long after that. Receiving an email from you is sheer fear and revulsion before I even look at it. This is another powerful quote that really shows, that drives home the kind of terrible, terrible effect that Temple has on some people. Okay, this is why I write that this quote is emblematic of Temple's effect on people's psychology. And I know that others feel similarly about receiving correspondence from him because they've told me, and I've also felt similarly in the past. The sheer fear and revulsion before I even look at it, that hits the nail on the head. I could not have put it better myself. Temple doesn't just admit that he's had this effect, but he actually seems kind of proud of it. What does Temple write? This is not in direct reference to this quote before, but it's in the same context. Temple claims, quote, David Deutsch is scared of my criticism. Scared. Okay, so this corroborates that David was terrified. David Deutsch is scared of my criticism. He can't see me as someone who doesn't matter, who no one will listen to. Okay, so here he's supposed to conclude that Elliot is important. In his mind, my critiques matter so much that it's hard for him to write anything in public where I could see it and comment. Luli Tannett told me that this is why he basically hasn't written anything since the beginning of Infinity in 2011. When he tries to write, he thinks of me and what criticism I might say, and he can't deal with it. Okay, so he just admits it all right there, that this is the effect he has on some people. He's had detrimental effects on my writing too, and there's one other person that I'm told has had a similar experience like Deutsch and me. Um, with Deutsch, it's particularly bad and destructive because he's such a brilliant person. I mean, he's the father of quantum computation. He has many other achievements that I'm not going to mention here for brevity, but he is by far one of the smartest people who's ever lived in the entire world. And I also know him personally a bit, and because I collaborated with him for over 2 years to translate one of his books. So he's just a brilliant guy. Okay, so imagine what else he could have accomplished. How many more texts he could have written by now in the past 14 years, um, if he didn't have any hangups to the temple. If he hadn't had to deal with any of Temple's verbal abuse, say, right? It's just awful. It's just awful. Here's another member of Temple's forum. I don't know if she's still in his forum. Maybe she is. I'm not sure. But anyway, she was at the time she wrote this. She wrote this to Temple's forum, Fallible Ideas, and B. And she explains the group's mentally crippling effect on her. When I was younger, I enjoyed feeling successful at doing things I was good at. I fear I'll never get that feeling of being successful again now that I can see how far I am from ever succeeding at anything. I seem unable to enjoy making progress. She also wrote, I don't feel free. I only do the stuff I care about. When Elliot says that no one does X, Y, and Z, and they should, I feel pressure to do X, Y, and Z. Yeah, I can corroborate that. I think he said similar things to me in the past. And I similarly felt pressure. She continues, it's not enough time to do that stuff, plus try to figure out what I want to do, if anything. And lastly, she says, everything I do confirms to others and to myself that I can't do anything right and will probably never get anywhere. Okay. That's the effect that group has had on her. Now, in that context of her, quote, unhappiness with FI, fallible ideas, end quote, Anne also heavily implied that she was considering turning to drugs and or alcohol to deal with her distress that she experienced in that group. And I've written this before, but I checked the logs and the archives from Temple's group. I'm not aware that he ever tried to discourage, I couldn't find anything to that effect, that he ever tried to discourage Anne from turning to drugs. What does he do? He sees an opportunity to sell her something and cover his ass in terms of liability. He writes to her, unless you actually pay for advice, I have zero responsibility for any choice you make. Okay. And as awful as these quotes are, there are many more things Temple has done that you can read about on my website, blog.dennisakathal.com. I think these are powerful quotes. I think they really show what kind of person Temple is. And like I said, this has to stop. And Temple must be held accountable because this is not okay.